The helicopter blades cut through the desert air like knives through butter. Inside the cramped metal cabin, Captain Sarah Mitchell checked her weapon for the third time in 5 minutes. Her hands moved with practiced precision, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought feared to tread. The other soldiers around her sat in tense silence, each lost in their own private war before the real one began. Sarah was 28 years old, but her eyes carried the weight of someone much older. 3 tours in combat zones had etched lines around her mouth and forehead that no amount of sleep could erase. Her dark hair was pulled back tight under her helmet, and sweat already beaded on her temples despite the cool morning air rushing through the open doors. The mission briefing had been short and brutal in its simplicity. A small village in the valley below had been overrun by enemy fighters. Civilians were trapped. Intelligence suggested at least 40 hostiles, heavily armed and dug in. The terrain was difficult, the enemy position strong. It was the kind of operation where everything could go wrong in a heartbeat. Lieutenant Marcus Chin sat across from her, his young face pale but determined. This was his first real combat drop. Sarah had seen that look before on countless other faces, some of whom never made it home. She caught his eye and gave him a slight nod. He returned it, gripping his rifle tighter. The pilot's voice crackled through their headsets. 2 minutes to drop zone. Winds picking up from the east. It's going to be rough. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Not from fear exactly, but from that electric anticipation that came before action. She had learned long ago that fear was useless. You either controlled it or it controlled you. She chose control, channeling the adrenaline into focus, sharpening her senses until every detail became crystal clear. Through the open door, she could see the landscape rolling beneath them. Brown hills gave way to green valleys, and in the distance, smoke rose from the village. Black columns against the blue sky, markers of destruction and chaos. Somewhere down there, people were hiding, praying, hoping that help would come. Sarah and her team were that hope. Sergeant James Rodriguez moved up beside her, checking the rope system they would use for the fast descent. He was a veteran like Sarah, his dark eyes constantly scanning, assessing, planning. They had served together for 2 years, and she trusted him with her life. "Looks hot down there, Captain," he said, his voice steady despite the situation. "When isn't it?" Sarah replied, allowing herself a brief smile. The helicopter suddenly banked hard to the right, and everyone grabbed for handholds. The pilot was taking evasive action, which meant they had likely been spotted or were entering enemy fire range. Sarah's heartbeat kicked up another notch. 30 seconds, the pilot shouted. Sarah stood, hooking her line to the rope. The rest of the team followed her lead, moving with coordinated efficiency. 12 soldiers in total, each one handpicked for this mission. Each one aware that some of them might not see tomorrow. The village grew larger in her vision. She could make out individual buildings now, some collapsed, others burning. Movement in the streets caught her eye. Figures running, taking positions. The enemy knew they were coming. 10 seconds. Sarah positioned herself at the door, wind whipping at her uniform. Below, the ground rushed up to meet them. She could see muzzle flashes now, small bursts of light from different positions around the village. They were already shooting at the helicopter. Go, go, go. Sarah didn't hesitate. She grabbed the rope and leapt from the helicopter into the combat zone. The world became a blur of motion and sound. Wind roared in her ears, the rope burned through her gloves, and bullets streaked through the air around her like angry hornets. The descent took only seconds but felt like an eternity. Her training kicked in completely now, her body moving on autopilot while her mind processed the tactical situation. She counted enemy positions, marked cover locations, planned her first moves even before her boots hit the ground. The impact jarred through her legs and spine. She rolled immediately, coming up with her weapon ready, scanning for targets. The rest of her team was landing around her, spreading out into defensive positions. The helicopter roared overhead, banking away sharply as tracer rounds chased it through the sky. Dust and debris filled the air from the rotor wash. Sarah blinked it away, focusing on the threats. An enemy fighter appeared from behind a low wall, rifle raised. Sarah's weapon barked 3 times, controlled bursts, and the man went down. No time to think about it. No time for anything but survival and Mission completion. Team Alpha, move to the east wall, she shouted into her radio. Team Bravo, secure that alley. Her soldiers moved like a well-oiled machine. Despite the chaos, despite the fear that must have been clawing at all of them, they executed their training perfectly. Sarah felt a surge of pride, even as bullets kicked up dirt around her feet. She sprinted toward a bombed-out building, Rodriguez right behind her. They slid behind cover just as a burst of automatic fire raked the position they had just left. Chunks of concrete exploded, showering them with dust and fragments. Contact, northwest, second floor window. Rodriguez called out, returning fire. Sarah peered around the corner, saw the flash of a weapon, and squeezed her trigger. The enemy fighter jerked backward and disappeared. How many more were there? The intelligence had said 40, but in the confusion and chaos of combat, it was impossible to know for sure. Lieutenant Chin's voice came through the radio, high-pitched with adrenaline, but clear. We've got civilians in the basement of the blue building. At least 20, including children. Copy that, Sarah responded. Hold position. We're coming to you. The mission was simple in concept, but brutal in execution. Get to the civilians, secure them, and hold until extraction arrived. The problem was that the enemy had no intention of letting them do any of that. They were dug in, they knew the terrain, and they were willing to die to stop the rescue. Sarah assessed the battlefield with cold efficiency. The village square was a killing zone, completely exposed with multiple enemy firing positions covering it. To reach the blue building where the civilians were trapped, they would have to cross that square or find another route. Rodriguez, what do you see? She asked. The sergeant was already studying the layout, his experienced eyes picking out details that others might miss. There's a drainage ditch running along the south side. If we can get to it, we can use it for cover most of the way. Sarah nodded. It was risky, but everything in this situation was risky. All teams, converge on my position. We're taking the south route. As her soldiers moved to comply, Sarah spotted a young girl peering out from a shattered window. The child's face was streaked with tears and dirt, her eyes wide with terror. For just a moment, their gazes met. Sarah saw the hope flicker in those young eyes, the desperate belief that these soldiers would save her. That look was why Sarah did this job. Not for medals or glory or patriotic speeches. For that little girl and every other innocent person caught in the crossfire of conflicts they never asked for. We're coming for you, Sarah whispered, though the girl couldn't possibly hear her. An explosion rocked the ground near the eastern wall. Sarah's head snapped toward it, saw smoke and dust billowing up. Team Alpha, report. We're okay, just an RPG. Missed us by 10 feet, came the response from Corporal Davis. Sarah's jaw tightened. RPGs meant they had heavier weapons than intelligence had suggested. This operation was getting more dangerous by the second. All teams, be advised, enemy has RPGs. Watch for secondary positions. The acknowledgments came back quickly. Her team was solid, but even solid teams could be overwhelmed. They needed to move fast, hit hard, and get those civilians out before the enemy could organize a coordinated assault. Move out, Sarah ordered. She led the way, keeping low, weapon ready. The drainage ditch Rodriguez had spotted was shallow, offering minimal cover, but it was better than nothing. She dropped into it, feeling the cold water seep into her boots. The smell of sewage and decay filled her nostrils, but she ignored it. The team followed her in a tactical column, each soldier covering a different angle. They moved quickly but carefully, knowing that one mistake could be fatal. Above them, bullets cracked through the air, some coming close enough that Sarah could feel the pressure wave as they passed. Halfway to the blue building, Sarah spotted another problem. An enemy machine gun nest had been set up in the ruins of what looked like a shop. The barrel was traversing, searching for targets. In seconds, it would find them in the ditch. Gun nest, 11 o'clock, she shouted. Suppressing fire now. The team opened up, dozens of rounds slamming into the position. The machine gun returned fire, tracers streaking overhead in both directions. Sarah pulled a grenade from her vest, pulled the pin, and threw it in one smooth motion. The grenade arced through the air, seeming to hang there for an impossible moment, before dropping into the nest. The explosion was deafening. Smoke and debris erupted from the position, and the machine gun fell silent. But Sarah knew they had just announced their position to every enemy fighter in the area. They had to move faster. "Double time," she ordered, pushing herself to move quicker through the filthy water. The blue building loomed ahead, its walls pockmarked with bullet holes, its windows blown out. Sarah could see Lieutenant Chun and his team holding defensive positions around the entrance. They looked ragged, bloodied, but still fighting. "Chun, we're coming in hot," Sarah radioed. "Copy that, Captain. We're ready." Sarah reached the building's entrance and practically threw herself through it, her team flooding in behind her. Inside, the smell of cordite and blood mixed with the fierce sweat of the civilians huddled in the basement stairwell. There were more than 20. Sarah did a quick count and came up with at least 35. Men, women, children, elderly. All of them dirty, scared, some injured. They looked at Sarah and her team with expressions that mixed hope and disbelief. An old woman clutched Sarah's arm, speaking rapidly in a language Sarah didn't understand. But the meaning was clear in her eyes. "Thank you. Please help us. Please don't leave us. We've got you," Sarah said firmly. Even though the woman probably didn't understand English any better than Sarah understood her language. "We're getting you out of here." Rodriguez appeared at her elbow. "Captain, we've got a problem. The extraction choppers can't land in this much fire. We need to clear a landing zone." Sarah's mind raced through options. They were outnumbered, low on ammunition, and now they had 35 civilians to protect and evacuate. The enemy controlled most of the village and was probably regrouping for a major assault. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. The building shook as an explosion detonated somewhere close, raining dust and debris down on everyone inside. One of the children screamed, quickly muffled by her mother's hand. Sarah could feel the fear in the room like a physical presence, thick and suffocating. But there was no time for comfort or reassurance beyond getting everyone out alive. Rodriguez was already organizing the civilians into groups, using hand gestures and simple words to communicate. Despite the language barrier, fear was universal, and so was the instinct to follow someone who projected confidence and control. The sergeant moved through them with calm efficiency, checking for serious injuries, identifying who could move independently and who would need help. Sarah moved to one of the blown-out windows, carefully peering out while staying behind cover. The street outside was a nightmare landscape of rubble and destruction. She could see enemy fighters moving between buildings, coordinating, preparing for an assault. They knew the rescue team was trapped in this building, and they were gathering strength to overwhelm them. Her tactical mind cataloged every detail. Enemy positions, firing lanes, potential escape routes. The situation was worse than she had initially assessed. The enemy had more fighters than expected, and they were better organized. Someone was commanding them with intelligence and discipline. "Captain," Corporal Davis's voice came through her earpiece. "We've got movement on the west side. At least 15 hostiles, maybe more. Hold your fire until they're in range," Sarah ordered. "Make every shot count. We're low on ammunition." That was the reality of their situation. Each soldier had started with standard combat load, but the intense firefight during the insertion and securing the building had depleted their supplies faster than planned. If this dragged on much longer, they would be fighting with whatever they could scavenge. Lieutenant Chun appeared beside her, his young face showing the strain of the last 30 minutes. His uniform was torn, and blood seeped from a cut on his forehead, but his hands were steady on his weapon. "The north perimeter is as secure as we can make it," he reported. "But those walls won't hold against a sustained assault. They're barely standing as it is." Sarah nodded, her mind working through the problem. 5 minutes until air support. Maybe less now. They just had to hold until then. But 5 minutes in combat could feel like 5 hours, and a lot of people could die in that time. She looked back at the civilians. An old man cradled what looked like his grandson, a boy no more than 7 years old. The child's leg was bandaged, blood seeping through the makeshift dressing. His eyes were glassy with pain and shock. Further back, a young mother held twin babies, one in each arm, rocking them gently and humming despite the terror that must have been consuming her. These were the people Sarah had sworn to protect, not in some abstract, patriotic sense, but in the concrete reality of their flesh and blood, their hopes and fears, their right to live without being murdered by fanatics with guns. Captain Mitchell, Rodriguez's urgent voice cut through her thoughts. We've got a problem. There's a family still trapped in the building next door. 4 people, including 2 children. They're afraid to make a run for it across the open ground. Sarah's stomach clenched. More civilians, still in danger. But taking soldiers to retrieve them would weaken their defensive position here. The tactical decision was clear. Secure the people they had. Wait for extraction. But Sarah had never been good at leaving people behind. Show me, she said. Rodriguez led her to a side window. Through the shattered glass, Sarah could see the adjacent building, maybe 30 meters away. A face appeared briefly in a second-floor window before ducking back. The space between the 2 buildings was completely exposed, a kill zone covered by at least 3 enemy positions that Sarah could identify. They'll never make it across on their own, Rodriguez said quietly. Sarah studied the layout, her mind racing through options. A smoke grenade could provide cover, but smoke worked both ways. The enemy could use it to advance on their position. A suppressing fire corridor could work, but it would burn through ammunition they desperately needed to conserve. Before she could make a decision, the radio crackled. Viper 6, this is Hammer 2-1. We're inbound on your position, 3 minutes out. Be advised, we're detecting heavy anti-aircraft activity in the area. Our window for extraction will be narrow. 3 minutes. The timeline was compressing. Sarah keyed her radio. Hammer 2-1, be advised we have additional civilians in adjacent building. We'll attempt to secure before extraction. Copy, Viper 6. Be quick. We can't loiter in this much fire. Sarah turned to Rodriguez. Get me Specialist Morrison and Corporal Jackson. We're going to get that family. The sergeant's face showed his concern, but he didn't question the order. Within seconds, the 2 soldiers appeared. Morrison was their medic, a tough woman from Texas who had patched up more wounded soldiers than Sarah could count. Jackson was young but fearless, with reflexes like a cat. Here's what we're doing, Sarah said quickly. Rodriguez, you're going to put suppressing fire on those 3 positions. She pointed them out. Morrison, Jackson, you're with me. We move fast, grab the family, and get back. 30 seconds, max. Morrison checked her medical pack. Jackson tightened his helmet strap. Both nodded their readiness. Sir, Chin interrupted. Let me take your place. You're too important to the mission. Sarah shook her head. That's exactly why I'm going. These people need to see that we don't abandon anyone. And if this goes wrong, you're capable of getting everyone else out. That's an order, Lieutenant. Chin's jaw tightened, but he stepped back. Sarah could see the conflict in his eyes, the desire to argue, but also the understanding that she was right. Leadership sometimes meant being the first one into danger, not the last. Sarah moved to the door, Morrison and Jackson flanking her. She pulled 2 smoke grenades from her vest, her last ones. She popped both, waited 2 seconds, then threw them out into the street. White smoke billowed up, creating a curtain between them and the enemy positions. Now, Sarah burst from the building at a dead run. The 30 meters might as well have been a mile. Bullets immediately cracked through the smoke, blind fire from enemy fighters who knew where they were even if they couldn't see clearly. Sarah heard the snap of rounds passing close to her head, felt one tug at her sleeve. She reached the building and slammed against the wall, breathing hard. Morrison and Jackson arrived a heartbeat later. Through the thin walls, Sarah could hear crying. Clear the doorway, she ordered Jackson, who kicked it open, going in low and fast. Sarah followed, Morrison right behind. Inside, the building was a wreck. Furniture overturned, walls pocked with bullet holes, the stench of fear thick in the air. A man appeared from behind an overturned table, eyes wild, holding a kitchen knife defensively. We're here to help, Sarah said, lowering her weapon slightly. We're getting you out. The man didn't understand English, but he understood the uniform, the urgency in Sarah's voice. He called out, and a woman emerged with 2 children clutching her legs. The children were maybe 4 and 6 years old, their faces streaked with tears and dirt. Morrison moved forward with gentle hands, checking the family quickly for injuries. They're okay, she said. Scared but mobile. We move now, Sarah said. She gestured for the family to follow, trying to communicate through actions what words couldn't convey. The father seemed to understand. He scooped up the smaller child. The mother took the older one's hand. Sarah led them back to the door. The smoke was beginning to clear, visibility improving. That was bad for them. She keyed her radio. Rodriguez, give me everything you've got. We're coming back. Roger that, Captain. The sound of sustained fire erupted from the building they had left. Rodriguez and the others were pouring rounds into the enemy positions, forcing them to take cover. It was now or never. Sarah grabbed the father's shoulder, made eye contact, and then pointed to the other building. Run, she said. Run. They ran. The family, Sarah, Morrison, and Jackson, all sprinting across the deadly open ground. The mother stumbled, nearly fell, but Jackson caught her arm and kept her moving. The children were crying. The father was shouting something, maybe a prayer. Bullets kicked up dust around them. Sarah heard Morrison grunt as something hit her body armor. But she kept running. They all kept running. 10 meters. 5. The door loomed ahead. Rodriguez was there, providing cover fire, his weapon barking controlled bursts. Sarah practically threw herself through the doorway, turning immediately to help pull the family inside. Jackson came through next, then Morrison, who was limping but intact. Everyone accounted for? Sarah demanded. Rodriguez nodded. All present. Morrison took one in the vest plate. But she's okay. The medic was already checking herself, probing the area where the bullet had struck. Just a bruise, she said through gritted teeth. I'm good. The family collapsed against a wall, the father still clutching his child, the mother sobbing with relief. Sarah wanted to give them a moment, wanted to let them catch their breath and process the terror they had just survived. But time was not on their side. Viper 6, Hammer 2-1, we are 1 minute out. Pop smoke to mark your LZ. Sarah moved to the window, facing what used to be the village square. It was the only area large enough for the helicopters to land. But it was also completely exposed to enemy fire. This was going to be ugly. All teams, listen up, she said into the radio. Extraction is 1 minute out. We're moving all civilians to the square. Every able-bodied soldier forms a perimeter and holds it until the last civilian is on board. Questions? There were none. Her team knew what needed to be done. Sarah turned to the civilians, all 40 or so of them now, including the family they had just rescued. Rodriguez was already organizing them, forming them into a column. Some of the men were helping carry the wounded and elderly. It was organized chaos, but it was organized. Chun, you take point, Sarah ordered. Get them to the square and start loading. Rodriguez, your rear guard. Morrison, Jackson, you're with the civilians, providing medical support and helping anyone who needs it. She looked at each of them in turn. Whatever happens, those civilians get on those birds. Clear. A chorus of acknowledgments came back. Sarah felt a swell of emotion that she quickly pushed down. There would be time for feelings later, if they survived. The sound of helicopter rotors grew louder, cutting through the constant crack of gunfire. Sarah grabbed a colored smoke grenade from Chun and moved to the door. She pulled the pin and threw it into the square. Orange smoke billowed up, marking the landing zone. Move out, Sarah ordered. The column of civilians began flowing out of the building, Chun and his team creating a protective corridor with their bodies. Enemy fire intensified immediately. The fighters knew what was happening and were throwing everything they had at stopping the evacuation. Sarah positioned herself at the doorway, firing controlled bursts at enemy positions. Beside her, other soldiers did the same. They were burning through their remaining ammunition at an alarming rate, but there was no choice. Every second they could suppress the enemy fire was another second for the civilians to reach safety. The first helicopter appeared over the rooftops, banking hard to descend into the square. Its door gunners opened up, heavy machine guns sweeping the surrounding buildings. Tracers arced out, slamming into enemy positions. The second helicopter followed close behind. Sarah watched as Chin's team began loading civilians. The old woman who had grabbed her arm earlier was helped aboard, then the young mother with the twins. One by one, they climbed into the helicopters, hands reaching down to pull them up, safety just inches away. But the enemy wasn't giving up. An RPG streaked out from a nearby building, missing the first helicopter by mere feet. The pilot jinked hard, nearly losing control. Another RPG followed, this one exploding against a wall behind the square, showering everyone with debris. We need to take out those RPG positions. Sarah shouted into her radio. Anyone got eyes on? I see them, Davis responded. Third building, east side, second floor. Sarah swung her weapon toward the position, saw a figure with the distinctive shape of an RPG launcher. She fired, 3-round burst, but, at this distance, with this much chaos, she couldn't tell if she hit. Davis was firing too, and several other soldiers, all concentrating on the threat. The figure dropped, the RPG launcher falling from the window. But Sarah knew there could be more. There were always more. The jets made another pass, their bombs creating a wall of fire and destruction that temporarily pushed back the enemy advance. Sarah used the moment to sprint across the square, joining Chun and the loading operation. Sweat poured down her face, mixing with dust and gunpowder residue. Her arms ached from the constant recoil of her weapon. Her legs burned from the running and crouching, but she pushed through it all. 10 civilians left, then 8, then 5. The family Sarah had rescued from the adjacent building was among the last group. The father looked back at her as he climbed aboard, his eyes conveying gratitude that no words could express. Sarah nodded once, sharply, then turned back to the perimeter. All teams, start falling back, she ordered. We're at maximum capacity and taking critical fire. We need to lift off now. Sarah did a rapid head count. All the civilians were aboard. Most of her team was loading onto the second helicopter. But there were still 4 soldiers on the perimeter, including herself. And the enemy was closing in fast. Go, Sarah shouted into her radio. Get those civilians out of here. The first helicopter lifted off, its rotors kicking up a storm of dust and debris. It tilted forward and accelerated away, tracers following it through the sky. Sarah held her breath until it cleared the village, disappearing over the hills. The civilians were safe, at least some of them. The second helicopter was overloaded, soldiers crammed into every available space. The pilot's voice came through with barely controlled urgency. Captain, we can take maybe 2 more. That's it. Sarah looked at the remaining soldiers. Davis, Jackson, Rodriguez, and herself. For soldiers, 2 spots. Davis, Jackson, load up, she ordered immediately. Jackson hesitated. Captain, we can't leave you, and Rodriguez. That's an order, Corporal. Move. The 2 soldiers reluctantly ran for the helicopter. Sarah grabbed Rodriguez's shoulder, pulling him toward cover as enemy fighters poured into the square from multiple directions. There were dozens of them now, sensing victory, smelling blood. Captain Mitchell, we can't wait, the pilot shouted. Then go, Sarah responded. We'll find another way out. Captain, Rodriguez started to protest. Save it, Sergeant. We've got work to do. The helicopter lifted off, struggling with its heavy load. Sarah watched it climb, willing it to move faster, to get clear before an RPG or heavy machine gun brought it down. The enemy was firing everything they had at it, tracers forming a deadly net through which the helicopter had to fly. For a terrible moment, Sarah thought they wouldn't make it. The helicopter shuddered, smoke trailing from its engine. But the pilot kept it flying, kept pushing forward, and then it was over the hills and gone. Silence fell over the square, broken only by the crunch of boots on rubble as enemy fighters advanced. Sarah and Rodriguez were alone now, cut off, surrounded, low on ammunition. The tactical situation had gone from desperate to impossible. Rodriguez checked his magazine. I've got maybe 10 rounds left. Sarah checked hers. 12. Not exactly an arsenal. The sergeant looked at her, and, despite the dire circumstances, he smiled. Been a hell of a ride, Captain. It's not over yet, Sarah said firmly. She refused to accept that they had come this far, saved all those people, only to die in this godforsaken village. Her mind raced through options, scenarios, desperate plans. They were in what remained of a small shop, walls crumbling, roof partially collapsed. Not much cover, but better than nothing. Through the gaps in the walls, Sarah could see enemy fighters moving carefully closer, using cover, coordinating their approach. They weren't taking chances, which bought Sarah and Rodriguez a few precious minutes. Sarah keyed her radio, though she wasn't sure if anyone was in range to hear. Any friendly forces? This is Viper 6. I have 2 soldiers cut off in the village square, requesting immediate assistance. Over. Static answered her. She tried again with the same result. They were on their own. Rodriguez was scanning the area, his tactical mind working the problem. There's a drainage system we came in through. If we can reach it, we might be able to use it to get out of the village. Sarah remembered the ditch, the cold, filthy water, the smell. It was maybe 50 meters away across open ground. It might as well have been on the moon. We'd never make it, she said. They've got every angle covered. Then, we make them think we're going a different direction, Rodriguez suggested. Create a diversion, draw them off. Then, make a break for it. It was thin, but it was something. Sarah considered it, weighing options that all seemed to lead to death. But dying while running had to be better than dying while hiding. Before she could respond, a new sound cut through the air, different from the jets, deeper, more rhythmic. Sarah's heart leaped as she recognized it. Apache attack helicopters. 2 of them came over the hills like angels of death, their nose-mounted chain guns already spinning. They opened fire, 30mm rounds tearing into enemy positions with devastating effect. Buildings exploded, fighters were cut down. The entire dynamic of the battlefield shifted in seconds. Sarah grabbed her radio. Apache flight, this is Viper 6. Friendly forces in the square, 2 personnel, we are in the bombed-out shop on the east side. Viper 6, Apache lead. We see you. Sit tight, we're clearing your exit route. The attack helicopters worked systematically, their infrared targeting systems identifying threats that human eyes couldn't see. Hellfire missiles streaked out, eliminating heavy weapons positions. The chain guns continued their deadly work, suppressing any enemy fighter who dared to show himself. It was the most beautiful thing Sarah had ever seen. Viper 6, Apache lead. You've got a 60-second window. There's a Humvee convoy coming up the south road. If you can reach it, they'll extract you. Sarah didn't need to be told twice. Rodriguez, let's move. They burst from cover, running in a crouch toward the south side of the village. The Apaches continued providing cover, their weapons systems tracking threats and eliminating them before Sarah and Rodriguez even saw them. It was like having guardian angels with chain guns. Sarah's lungs burned. Her legs felt like lead, but she pushed harder. Rodriguez was beside her, limping slightly from an injury Sarah hadn't noticed before, but keeping pace. They vaulted over rubble, dodged through narrow alleys, driven by the singular goal of reaching that convoy. She saw them before she heard them. 4 armored Humvees, American flags fluttering from their antennas, racing toward the village. The lead vehicle's gun turrets swiveled toward them, then away as the gunner recognized them as friendlies. The convoy didn't slow down. Sarah and Rodriguez reached the road just as the lead Humvee pulled alongside. The rear door flew open, and hands reached out to pull them inside. Sarah practically fell into the vehicle, Rodriguez tumbling in behind her. The door slammed shut, and the convoy accelerated away, all 4 vehicles laying down, suppressing fire as they retreated. Inside the Humvee, Sarah found herself pressed between Rodriguez and 2 other soldiers she didn't recognize. Everyone was breathing hard, adrenaline still pumping. The soldier across from her, a young specialist with corporal stripes, offered her a canteen. "Ma'am, that was the ballsiest thing I've ever seen," he said with obvious admiration. Sarah took a long drink, the water tasting like the finest wine she'd ever had. "Just doing the job, soldier." "The hell you were," the corporal insisted. "Everyone's been hearing about it on the radio. You jumped into a hot LZ, rescued over 40 civilians, and held off an enemy force 4 times your size. They're already calling you a hero." Sarah's jaw tightened. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt exhausted, scared, and incredibly lucky to be alive. Heroes were the ones who didn't make it back, the ones who gave everything. She had just been doing what needed to be done. Rodriguez caught her eye, understanding her thoughts without words. They had served together long enough to read each other. He gave her a small nod, acknowledging her discomfort, but also acknowledging the truth of what they had accomplished. The convoy raced through the desert, putting distance between them and the village. Sarah looked back through the small window, saw smoke rising into the sky, marking the site of the battle. How many enemy fighters had died today? How many on her side? The cost of war was always measured in lives, and the accounting was never fair. Her radio crackled with incoming messages. Command wanting reports, other units requesting information, the whole military machine processing what had happened. Sarah listened with half an ear, too tired to fully engage. There would be debriefings, after-action reports, probably some kind of ceremony. But, right now, all she wanted was to see her team, to confirm that they had all made it out alive. "Rodriguez," she said quietly. "What's your injury?" The sergeant looked down at his leg, seeming to notice it for the first time. "Took some shrapnel when that building exploded. Nothing serious." Sarah could see blood seeping through his pants. Nothing serious, in combat terms, meant it wasn't immediately life-threatening. But infection, complications, those could come later. "Get it looked at when we reach base," she ordered. "Yes, ma'am." The Humvee hit a bump, jostling everyone inside. Sarah braced herself against the wall, her body starting to register all the minor injuries she had sustained. Bruises, cuts, strains. Nothing that wouldn't heal, but combined they created a chorus of pain that was hard to ignore. One of the other soldiers in the vehicle, a lieutenant she didn't recognize, leaned forward. "Captain Mitchell, I'm Lieutenant Barnes. I was monitoring your operation from the TOC. What you did back there. I've been in this war for 18 months, and I've never seen anything like it." Sarah met his eyes. She saw the respect there, but also something else. The lieutenant was trying to process what he had witnessed, trying to understand how someone could make the choices she had made, take the risks she had taken. It was a question Sarah had asked herself many times over the years. "We don't leave people behind," she said simply. "Not civilians, not our own soldiers. That's the standard, even when the odds are impossible." Barnes asked. "Especially then," Sarah replied. "Because if we only fight when victory is certain, we'll never fight when it really matters." The lieutenant considered this, nodded slowly. Sarah could see him filing it away, adding it to his own understanding of leadership and duty. She hoped he would remember it, hoped it would serve him well in whatever challenges lay ahead. The convoy began to slow. Sarah looked out and saw they were approaching a forward operating base, its perimeter marked by barriers and guard towers. Home, at least temporarily. Safety, relative as it might be. As the Humvee rolled through the gates, Sarah saw her team gathered near the landing pad where the evacuation helicopters had touched down. They had been waiting for her. When they spotted the convoy, they straightened, relief visible even from a distance. The Humvee stopped, and Sarah climbed out on legs that threatened to buckle. Rodriguez emerged behind her, limping but grinning. The team converged on them, everyone talking at once, hands clapping shoulders, the raw emotion of survival overriding military formality. Lieutenant Chun reached her first. His eyes were red-rimmed, either from dust or tears, maybe both. "We thought," his voice cracked. "When that second bird had to leave you behind, we thought." "I'm fine, Lieutenant," Sarah said gently. "We're all fine. Mission accomplished." "The civilians?" Rodriguez asked. "All accounted for," Davis reported. "They're being processed now, receiving medical attention. Every single one of them made it." Sarah felt something release in her chest, a tension she hadn't fully acknowledged until this moment. 42 civilians. All alive. All safe. The cost in ammunition, in danger, in years taken off her life from stress, all of it was worth it for that outcome. Morrison approached, no longer limping despite the bruise that must have been forming under her body armor. "Captain, you need to get checked out by medical." Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to say she was fine, but the truth was she was running on fumes. Adrenaline could only carry you so far before the crash came. After the debrief, she compromised. "Ma'am, after the debrief, specialist. That's final." Morrison backed down, recognizing the tone that meant the discussion was over. Sarah appreciated her concern, but there were procedures to follow, reports to file. The military ran on paperwork as much as it ran on bullets. A major Sarah recognized as the base commander approached, his face grave. "Captain Mitchell, hell of a job out there. But we need to talk. There are some things about this mission that don't add up." Sarah's exhaustion suddenly felt heavier. "What kind of things, sir?" "Intelligence discrepancies. The enemy force was significantly larger than expected, better armed, better organized. Either our intel was bad, or something else is going on." Sarah's mind, tired as it was, immediately started working the problem. The major was right. Everything about that mission had been harder than it should have been. The enemy had known they were coming, had been prepared, had fought with unusual coordination. The hour Sarah had been given felt like 5 minutes. She managed to shower, washing away layers of dust, sweat, and dried blood that wasn't all hers. The water ran brown at her feet, circling the drain like the last few hours circling in her mind. Every moment replayed itself with crystal clarity, from the leap out of the helicopter to the desperate run to the extraction convoy. She changed into a clean uniform, the fresh fabric feeling strange against her skin after the grime-caked combat gear. In the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Her face was drawn, new lines etched around her eyes and mouth. The mission had aged her, just like all the others before it. Rodriguez found her in the mess hall, forcing down an MRE that tasted like cardboard but provided necessary calories. His leg was properly bandaged now, and he moved with less of a limp. "Medical says I'll be fine," he reported, sitting down across from her. "Couple weeks of light duty, then back to full operations." Sarah nodded, chewing mechanically. "Good. We need you." They sat in silence for a moment, both lost in their own thoughts. Around them, the normal activity of the base continued. Soldiers moved between buildings, vehicles rumbled past, the rhythms of military life that never stopped. But Sarah felt separate from it, like she was watching through glass. "You know they're going to want to put you up for a medal," Rodriguez said quietly. Sarah's jaw tightened. "I don't want a medal. I want answers about why we walked into an ambush. Maybe it wasn't an ambush. Maybe the intel was just wrong." "You believe that?" Rodriguez met her eyes. After a long pause, he shook his head. "No. It felt wrong from the start. They were too ready, too organized. Someone told them we were coming." Sarah pushed her half-eaten meal away, appetite gone. The implications were ugly. If there was a leak, it meant someone in the chain of command couldn't be trusted. It meant future operations were compromised. It meant soldiers would die. A private appeared at her elbow. "Captain Mitchell? Major Hendricks is ready for your debrief." Sarah stood, Rodriguez rising with her. "You coming?" she asked. "Wouldn't miss it." They walked together across the base toward the operations center, a squat concrete building that looked like it could survive anything short of a direct missile strike. Inside, the air was cool and dry, recycled through systems that hummed constantly. Sarah was directed to a conference room, where Major Hendricks waited along with two other officers she didn't recognize. "Captain Mitchell, Sergeant Rodriguez, please sit," Hendricks said, gesturing to chairs across the table. "These are Colonel Winters from Intelligence and Captain Shaw from Criminal Investigation." Sarah's internal alarms went off. Criminal investigation meant they suspected more than just bad intel. They suspected intentional betrayal. "Let's start from the beginning," Colonel Winters said, opening a laptop. "You received the mission brief at 0600 hours. What were the details?" Sarah recounted everything she remembered. The village location, the estimated enemy force of 40 fighters, the civilians reported trapped. As she spoke, Winters typed rapidly, his expression neutral. "And these numbers match the intelligence report you received?" he asked. "Yes, sir." Everything matched. But the reality on the ground was different. Significantly, we encountered at least 80 fighters, maybe more. They had RPGs, heavy machine guns, and they were dug in at prepared positions. It wasn't a random occupation. They were expecting us. Captain Shaw leaned forward. "Could they have just been better prepared than we thought? More organized than typical militia?" Sarah considered this. Possible, but unlikely. The coordination was too good. They had overlapping fields of fire, predetermined fallback positions, disciplined fire control. That takes planning and training. Or good leadership, Shaw suggested. Or advance warning, Rodriguez added bluntly. The room fell silent. Major Hendricks rubbed his face, looking older than his years. "That's what we're afraid of. This is the third operation in 2 months that's encountered unexpectedly heavy resistance. The pattern is concerning." Third, Sarah felt ice in her stomach. Why wasn't this flagged sooner? "It was," Colonel Winters said grimly. "But proving a leak is different from suspecting one. We've been investigating quietly, trying not to tip off whoever might be responsible. Today's mission was supposed to help us narrow down the possibilities." Sarah's hands clenched into fists under the table. "You used us as bait." We used a high-priority mission with limited distribution of information to track where leaks might be occurring. Winters corrected, though his tone suggested he understood her anger. And it worked. We now know the leak is somewhere in the operational planning chain. And my team walked into a death trap because of it, Sarah said, her voice cold. Major Hendricks held up a hand. Captain, I understand your anger. But your team succeeded despite the compromised intel. You saved 42 civilians, and all of your soldiers made it home. That's a win. A win that cost us how much ammunition, how much risk, how much luck. Sarah shot back. Next time, luck might run out. There won't be a next time, Winters said firmly. Not until we plug this leak. That's why we need your help. We need every detail of who knew what about this mission and when they knew it. For the next 2 hours, Sarah and Rodriguez went through every aspect of the operation. Who had briefed them, who had been present, who had access to the mission files. The list was disturbingly long. Any one of dozens of people could have passed information to the enemy. Captain Shaw made notes on a tablet, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Sarah could see the investigation forming in real time, threads being pulled, connections being made. It was a different kind of combat, but no less important. What about the civilian source who reported the situation in the village? Rodriguez asked. Could they have been the leak? Winters shook his head. We verified that source through multiple channels. They're legitimate. In fact, they're in protective custody now because of their cooperation. So the leak is one of ours, Sarah said, the words tasting bitter. That's the assumption we're working with, Winters confirmed. A knock at the door interrupted them. A specialist stuck her head in. Sir, sorry to interrupt, but we've got a situation. One of the evacuated civilians is asking to speak with Captain Mitchell specifically. Sarah exchanged glances with the others. Which one? The old woman, sir. She's quite insistent. Says she has important information that only you can hear. Sarah stood. I'll go talk to her. Captain, the debrief, Hendricks started. Can wait 10 minutes, sir, Sarah finished. If she has information, we need to hear it. Hendricks nodded reluctantly. Fine. But take Shaw with you. If this relates to the investigation, we need documentation. Sarah and Captain Shaw followed the specialist across the base to the medical facility where the civilians were being housed temporarily. The smell of antiseptic and fear hung in the air. Families huddled together in small groups, still processing their trauma, still hardly believing they were safe. The old woman was in a corner, sitting on a cot with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders despite the warm temperature. When she saw Sarah, her eyes lit up with recognition and something else. Urgency. Sarah approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. I'm Captain Mitchell. You wanted to speak with me. The woman grabbed Sarah's hand with surprising strength, pulling her close. She spoke rapidly in her own language, words tumbling over each other. Sarah shook her head apologetically. I don't understand. Do we have a translator? The specialist nodded. Yes, ma'am. I'll get him. While they waited, the old woman kept hold of Sarah's hand, her eyes boring into Sarah's with intensity. Whatever she wanted to say, it was important to her. Life and death important. The translator arrived, a young sergeant with the weary look of someone who had heard too many tragic stories. I'm Sergeant Malik, ma'am. I speak the local dialect. Ask her what she wants to tell me, Sarah instructed. Malik spoke to the woman, who responded immediately, her words flowing fast and urgent. As she spoke, Malik's expression changed from professional interest to shock. What is she saying? Sarah demanded. Malik held up a hand, letting the woman finish. When she finally stopped, he turned to Sarah with a grave expression. Ma'am, she says there was a foreign man in the village 3 days ago. Not one of the fighters, someone different. He was meeting with the leaders, giving them information. Sarah's pulse quickened. What kind of information? More rapid dialogue between Malik and the woman. She says he told them when soldiers would come, how many, what weapons they would have. He gave them time to prepare, to bring in more fighters. Can she describe this man? Captain Shaw asked sharply. The translator relayed the question. The old woman's response was detailed. Malik translated. Tall, maybe 6 feet. Light skin, not local. Spoke English with an accent she didn't recognize. Had a scar on his left hand, between thumb and forefinger. Wore expensive watch, military-style boots. Sarah and Shaw exchanged looks. This was the break they needed. A physical description, details that could be matched against personnel records. Did she hear a name? Sarah asked. More translation. The woman thought for a moment, then spoke a single word that made Sarah's blood run cold. She says the fighters called him the American, Malik said quietly. The implications hung in the air like poison gas. Not just a leak. Not just someone passing information carelessly. But active collaboration, deliberate betrayal. An American working directly with the enemy. Shah was already on his radio, calling back to the operations center. We need to secure the base. No one leaves until we can verify everyone's whereabouts for the past week. Sarah turned back to the old woman. Ask her if she would recognize him again if she saw a photograph. The translator asked. The woman nodded vigorously, speaking with certainty. She says yes, absolutely. She got a good look at him multiple times. She was hiding in a basement, and he walked past several times. She would never forget his face. Get her to the operations center, Shah ordered. And get every personnel file we have. We're going to find this traitor. As Sarah watched the woman being escorted away, supported by Malik and a medic, she felt a cold fury building in her chest. Someone wearing the same uniform she wore, sworn to the same oath she had taken, had sold out his comrades and endangered civilians for money or ideology or whatever corrupted motivation had driven him. That betrayal was worse than any enemy ambush. The enemy at least was honest in their opposition. But a traitor, someone who smiled and shook hands and planned operations while secretly working to ensure they failed, that was a different level of evil. Rodriguez appeared at her side, having followed from the debriefing. I heard. An American. We're going to find him, Sarah said quietly. And when we do, I want 5 minutes alone with him before they haul him off to a military prison. Get in line, Rodriguez replied with unusual venom in his voice. They walked back to the operations center together, both processing what this meant. How many operations had been compromised? How many soldiers had died because of this man's betrayal? The numbers were impossible to calculate, but Sarah knew they were significant. The operations center was now a hive of activity. Officers and enlisted personnel moved with purpose, files were being pulled, computers were being secured. Colonel Winters stood at the center of it all, orchestrating the investigation with military precision. He saw Sarah and waved her over. Captain, we're implementing full lockdown protocols. No one enters or leaves this base without personal authorization from Major Hendricks or myself. We're going to go through every person assigned here, verify their background, their movements, everything. How many personnel are we talking about? Sarah asked. 347 on base currently, Winters replied. It's going to take time. Time the traitor might use to run, Shaw pointed out. He won't run, Sarah said with certainty. If he runs, he admits guilt. He'll try to blend in, act normal, wait for the investigation to pass over him. Winters studied her. You're thinking like him. I'm thinking like someone who wants to survive, Sarah corrected. And right now, his best chance is to act like nothing's wrong. Then, we'll accommodate that, Winters said with a thin smile. We'll conduct routine interviews with everyone, make it look like standard post-mission debriefing. Meanwhile, we'll be narrowing down suspects based on access, opportunity, and that physical description. What about the watch and boots? Rodriguez asked. Those are specific details. Shaw nodded. Already on it. We're checking procurement records for that style of watch, cross-referencing with personnel who were off base in the relevant time window. Sarah felt the investigation tightening like a noose. Whoever this traitor was, his time was running out. But there was still the chance he would realize what was happening and try to destroy evidence or flee. They needed to move fast. I want to be there when you identify him, Sarah said to Winters. The colonel studied her for a moment. Captain, I understand your personal investment in this, but, sir, with respect, my personal investment is exactly why I should be there. I know what that ambush felt like. I know what it cost. And I know how to read people under stress. Let me help finish this. Winters considered, then nodded. Fine. But you follow Shah's lead. This is his investigation now. The next several hours were some of the longest of Sarah's life. She sat in on interview after interview, watching soldiers and officers answer questions about their whereabouts and activities. Most were clearly innocent, confused about why they were being questioned so thoroughly. A few were nervous, but That could have been natural reaction to being interrogated. The old woman was brought in to look at photographs. She went to Sarah stared at the photograph, her mind refusing to accept what she was seeing. The young specialist who had offered her water, who had praised her courage, who had sat across from her in the Humvee with apparent admiration in his eyes. That same person had betrayed them all. Are you absolutely certain? Captain Shah asked the old woman through Malik. She nodded emphatically, speaking with conviction. Malik translated. She says yes, without doubt. She remembers the scar on his hand specifically. She saw it when he was checking a map with the enemy leaders. Colonel Winters was already moving, pulling up Barnes's personnel file on a computer. Specialist Trevor Barnes, assigned to convoy operations, been in country for 14 months. Background check came back clean when he enlisted. Pull his financial records, Shah ordered. Look for unusual deposits, offshore accounts, anything that doesn't match his pay grade. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. She had sat across from this man, had accepted his help, had let him see her vulnerable. The betrayal cut deeper than any enemy bullet could have. Where is he now? She demanded. Winters checked the duty roster. According to this, he's in the vehicle bay performing maintenance on the Humvees from today's convoy. Convenient, Rodriguez muttered. Access to vehicles if he needs to run. Shah grabbed his radio. All units, this is investigation lead. We need Specialist Trevor Barnes detained immediately for questioning. Approach with caution, he may be armed and is considered dangerous. No one is to inform him why he's being detained. Acknowledgements came back from around the base. Sarah was already moving toward the door. I'm coming with you. Captain, Winters started. He looked me in the eye and lied, sir, Sarah said, her voice cold. I'm coming. Something in her tone made Winters back down. He nodded to Shah, who checked his sidearm and led the way out. Sarah, Rodriguez, and 4 armed military police followed. They moved quickly but quietly through the base, not wanting to alert Barnes before they could surround him. The vehicle bay was a large structure on the east side of the base, open on 2 sides to allow vehicles to drive through. Floodlights illuminated the interior where several Humvees sat in various states of maintenance. Sarah could hear the clang of tools on metal, the sound of someone working. Shah held up a hand, stopping the group. He used hand signals to position the MPs around the exits, cutting off escape routes. Sarah and Rodriguez stayed with him as they approached the central area where the sounds were coming from. Barnes was under one of the Humvees, his legs sticking out. The same Humvee Sarah had ridden in earlier. She wondered if he was destroying evidence, removing traces of his communications with the enemy. Shah cleared his throat. Specialist Barnes, we need you to come out from under there. There was a pause. Then, Barnes rolled out, grease staining his uniform. He looked up at them with a confused expression that was almost convincing. Sir, is something wrong? We have some questions about your activities over the past week, Shah said neutrally. Please stand up and come with us. Barnes stood slowly, his eyes moving between the officers and the MPs positioned around the bay. Sarah saw the exact moment when he realized he was trapped. His expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. A calculation, an assessment of odds. Of course, sir, he said calmly. Whatever you need. He started walking toward Shah, hands visible, movements non-threatening. But Sarah had seen combat enough to recognize the coiled tension in his body, the way he measured distances with his eyes. He was planning something. Stop, she commanded. Put your hands on your head. Barnes stopped, his gaze shifting to Sarah. And there it was, behind the false confusion. Recognition and hatred. Captain Mitchell, the hero of the hour. Did they tell you about the medal yet? Hands on your head, now, Sarah repeated. Or what? Barnes asked, his voice taking on an edge. You'll shoot an unarmed soldier? That doesn't seem very heroic. Shah moved forward. Specialist, you're only making this worse. Put your hands. Barnes exploded into motion. His hand flashed to his boot, coming up with a knife that must have been concealed there. He lunged at Shah, the blade aimed at the captain's throat. Sarah's training took over. She drew her sidearm and fired in one smooth motion. The round caught Barnes in the shoulder, spinning him around. The knife clattered to the concrete floor. He stumbled, but didn't fall, turning to face Sarah with blood spreading across his uniform. Secure him, Shah ordered. The MPs rushed forward, forcing Barnes to the ground despite his struggles. They zip-tied his hands behind his back while he cursed and spat. Sarah kept her weapon trained on him until he was completely restrained. Check him for other weapons, Shah commanded. They found another knife strapped to his ankle, a small pistol in the small of his back, and a cell phone that had been modified in ways that looked distinctly non-standard. Shah carefully bagged each item as evidence. Barnes was hauled to his feet, blood dripping from his shoulder wound. He looked at Sarah with pure venom. You should have died in that village. You and your whole team. That was the plan. Sarah's jaw tightened. Why? Money? Ideology? What makes a soldier betray his own? Barnes laughed, a harsh sound. You think you're the good guys? You come into countries you don't understand, kill people defending their homes, and call it liberation. I just help level the playing field. By getting civilians killed? Rodriguez asked incredulously. Those people we saved, your help, put them in danger. Collateral damage, Barnes said coldly. War always has casualties. Get him to medical, then to a holding cell, Winters ordered, disgust evident in his voice. And get that shoulder treated. He'll stand trial for treason. As the MPs dragged Barnes away, still ranting about American imperialism and justifications that rang hollow, Sarah felt exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical fatigue. This kind of betrayal cut deeper than any combat wound. Shah placed a hand on her shoulder. You did good, Captain. Clean shot. Stopped him without killing him. He'll face justice now. Justice, Sarah repeated, the word tasting bitter. Will justice bring back the soldiers who died because of him? Will it undo the trauma those civilians suffered? No, Shah admitted. But it will stop him from causing more damage. And it will send a message that betrayal has consequences. The investigation continued into the night and the following days. Barnes's modified phone revealed encrypted communications with enemy contacts, detailed information about base security, and evidence of payments made to offshore accounts. He had been working with the enemy for nearly a year, compromising dozens of operations. The full scope of his betrayal was staggering. Sarah sat through briefing after briefing, learning about missions that had failed, soldiers who had walked into ambushes, intelligence assets who had been exposed and killed. All because one man had decided his ideology was more important than his oath. The military machine ground forward with its investigation and prosecution. Barnes was court-martialed, found guilty on multiple counts of treason, conspiracy, and providing material support to enemy forces. The sentence was life in military prison without possibility of parole. Sarah attended the sentencing hearing, sitting in the back of the courtroom in her dress uniform. Barnes never looked at her, never showed any remorse. He remained defiant to the end, convinced of his own righteousness even as he was led away in chains. Afterward, Colonel Winters found her outside the courtroom. Captain Mitchell, I wanted to thank you personally. Your actions during that mission and during the investigation were exemplary. You're being awarded the Silver Star for valor. Sarah nodded mechanically. Another medal to add to the box in her footlocker where she kept such things. They felt meaningless now, pieces of metal that couldn't capture the reality of what war actually cost. There's something else, Winters continued. The 42 civilians you rescued have been processed for refugee status. Many of them have asked to thank you personally. The old woman in particular has been quite insistent. Sarah felt something warm in her chest, pushing back against the cold exhaustion. I'd like that, sir. The meeting was arranged at a refugee processing center near the base. Sarah arrived in casual uniform, not wanting to seem too formal or intimidating. The civilians were gathered in a common area, and when she entered, they all stood. The old woman rushed forward, tears streaming down her face. She grabbed Sarah's hands, speaking rapidly through an interpreter who had been brought along. She says you are a warrior with the heart of a mother. The interpreter translated. You risked everything for people you didn't know, for children who were not your own. In her culture, such courage is the highest honor. Other civilians came forward, each wanting to shake Sarah's hand or offer thanks in their own way. The young mother with twins pressed a small woven bracelet into Sarah's palm, insisting through gestures that she keep it. The father from the adjacent building saluted her awkwardly, tears in his eyes. But it was the little girl Sarah had seen through the window, the one whose terrified eyes had driven her forward, who affected her most. The child approached shyly, holding a drawing she had made. It showed a woman in uniform with angel wings, protecting a group of people from dark shapes that surrounded them. Sarah knelt down to the girl's level, accepting the drawing with gentle hands. "Thank you," she said, knowing the child didn't understand English, but hoping the emotion would translate. The girl suddenly hugged her, small arms wrapping around Sarah's neck. Sarah felt something break inside her chest. Tears she had been holding back for days finally spilling free. She hugged the child back, feeling the fragile weight of her, the trust, the innocence that had nearly been destroyed. This was why she fought, not for medals or glory or political ideology. For this little girl, and all the others like her, for the chance to let them grow up without fear, to let them draw pictures of heroes instead of living through nightmares. When the meeting ended and Sarah returned to the base, Rodriguez found her sitting alone in the chapel, staring at the drawing the little girl had given her. "Pretty good likeness," he said, sitting down beside her. "Though I don't remember you having wings during the mission." Sarah smiled despite herself. "Must have left them in my other uniform." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both processing everything that had happened. The mission, the betrayal, the aftermath. War was never clean, never simple, never what the recruiting posters suggested. "You know they're going to want you to re-up your contract," Rodriguez said. "Keep you in theater. There's talk of a promotion, maybe company command." Sarah considered this. Part of her wanted to say yes, to continue serving, to be there for the next mission and the one after that. But another part of her was tired, bone-deep tired, and wondered how many more times she could leap from helicopters into combat zones before her luck finally ran out. "What are you going to do?" she asked Rodriguez. "Me? I'm a lifer. I'll probably die in some desert somewhere, arguing with a sergeant major about proper uniform regulations." He smiled to take the edge off the dark humor. "But you, Captain, you've got options. You could teach, train the next generation. Share what you know without having to dodge bullets. Is that what you think I should do?" Rodriguez looked at the drawing in her hands, at the image of the winged protector. "I think you should do whatever lets you sleep at night. This job, it takes pieces of you every time. You have to decide how many pieces you're willing to give before there's nothing left." Sarah thought about the last 3 years, the missions that had succeeded and those that had failed, the soldiers she had led, and those who hadn't made it home. Rodriguez was right. This job took pieces, little bits of your soul, until one day you looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back. But she also thought about those 42 civilians, alive because she had been willing to leap from a helicopter into hell. She thought about her team, soldiers who trusted her with their lives because she had earned that trust through action, not words. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "Ask me after I've slept for about a week." Rodriguez chuckled. "Fair enough." They stood, leaving the quiet sanctuary of the chapel for the harsh reality of the base beyond. As they walked, Sarah folded the drawing carefully and placed it in her pocket, close to her heart. Life continued at the forward operating base with its usual rhythm. Training exercises, patrols, briefings, the endless cycle of military life in a combat zone. Sarah threw herself into it, finding comfort in routine after the chaos of the mission. Lieutenant Chun approached her one morning during a training exercise. His forehead wound had healed to a thin scar, a permanent reminder of his first real combat drop. "Captain, I wanted to ask you something," he said nervously. "Go ahead, Lieutenant." "That mission, when everything went wrong, you never hesitated. You just kept moving forward, kept making decisions. How do you do that? How do you stay calm when everything's falling apart?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "You don't stay calm, not really. You just don't let fear make your decisions for you. Every mission has a moment where it could go either way, where one choice means success, and another means disaster. In that moment, you have to trust your training, trust your team, and trust yourself. But what if you make the wrong choice? Then you adapt and keep moving," Sarah replied. "Indecision kills more soldiers than bad decisions. You have to be willing to act, to commit, even when you're not certain. That's what leadership is." Chun absorbed this, nodding slowly. Sarah could see him filing it away, adding it to his own developing understanding of command. He would be a good officer someday, she thought. The mission had tested him, and he had proven himself capable. Word came down a week later that the refugee processing had been completed. The 42 civilians were being relocated to a safe country where they could rebuild their lives. Sarah made sure to be present when they left, watching the buses carry them away toward futures that had almost been stolen from them. The old woman waved from a bus window, her face split in a smile that showed missing teeth, but genuine joy. The little girl was beside her, pressing her hand against the glass. Sarah waved back, feeling something settle in her chest. Whatever else happened, whatever choices she made about her future, she would always have this. The knowledge that she had made a difference, that 42 people were alive because she had been willing to risk everything. Major Hendricks called her to his office later that day. He gestured for her to sit, his expression serious. "Captain Mitchell, I've been authorized to offer you a promotion to major and a position on the operations staff. You'd be helping plan missions instead of executing them. It's a recognition of your tactical abilities and leadership." Sarah had been expecting something like this. Success in combat often led to being pulled away from it, promoted into positions where your experience could benefit more soldiers, but where you were further from the action. "Sir, I appreciate the offer, but I need some time to think about it." Hendricks nodded as if he had expected this answer. "Take the time you need, but don't take too long. The Army needs good officers, and you're one of the best I've seen." Sarah left his office with her mind churning. A promotion was supposed to be a good thing, advancement, recognition. But it also meant change, a shift away from leading soldiers directly toward pushing paper and managing operations from a distance. She found herself walking to the base perimeter, looking out at the desert landscape beyond the wire. Somewhere out there, enemy fighters were planning their next attack. Somewhere, civilians were trapped, hoping someone would come to save them. The war continued, indifferent to individual struggles and choices. Rodriguez found her there as the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. "Heard about the promotion offer," he said, leaning against the barrier beside her. "News travels fast. It always does. So what are you thinking?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "I'm thinking about that little girl's drawing. About how she saw me as a protector with wings. What happens if I take a staff position? Will there be someone else willing to leap from helicopters when the next crisis happens?" "There's always someone willing," Rodriguez assured her. "The question is, does it have to be you every time?" It was a fair question, one Sarah didn't have a good answer for. She had been leaping from helicopters, literally and figuratively, for 3 years. At some point, she would have to stop. The only question was when. "I keep thinking about Barnes," she admitted. "About how he wore the same uniform, took the same oath. But somewhere along the way, he lost sight of what that meant. How do I make sure I don't do the same thing? How do I keep fighting without becoming bitter or cynical or losing the part of myself that actually cares?" Rodriguez considered this carefully. "I think the fact that you're asking that question means you're still okay. It's when you stop caring, stop questioning, that you're in trouble. As long as you remember why you're doing this, you'll be fine." Sarah looked at him. This soldier who had served beside her through countless missions, who had never let her down, who understood the weight of command in ways few others did. "What would you do," she asked, "if you were offered the promotion?" Rodriguez smiled. "I'd probably take it, because I'm old and tired and my knees hurt. But I'm not you, Captain. You've got years ahead of you, and you're better at this than anyone I've served with. Whatever you decide, it'll be the right choice." They stood together in companionable silence as darkness fell over the base. Lights flickered on across the compound, small points of illumination against the vast emptiness of the desert night. Somewhere, soldiers were standing watch. Somewhere, missions were being planned. The machine never stopped. Sarah made her decision that night, sitting alone in her quarters with the little girl's drawing pinned to the wall above her bunk. She would accept the promotion, but with conditions. She wanted to remain operational, to still be able to lead missions when needed, to stay connected to the soldiers and the reality of what they faced. When she presented this to Major Hendricks the next day, he raised an eyebrow, but nodded. "That's unconventional, but I think we can make it work. You'd be the operational planning officer with field authority. You'd plan the missions and have the option to lead them when appropriate." "That's what I want, sir." "Then, consider it done, Major Mitchell." He extended his hand, which Sarah shook firmly. The promotion ceremony was small and simple, held on the parade ground with her team present. As the new rank insignia was pinned to her uniform, Sarah looked out at the faces of the soldiers she had served with. Chun, Rodriguez, Morrison, Davis, Jackson, all of them. These were the people who had trusted her with their lives, who had followed her into combat, and come home safely because of decisions she had made. "Thank you all," she said simply, "for making me better than I am alone." The applause was genuine, heartfelt. Sarah felt the weight of new responsibility settling on her shoulders along with the new rank. More soldiers would be depending on her now, more missions would succeed or fail based on her planning and leadership. It was a heavy burden, but one she was ready to carry. Months passed. Sarah proved herself in her new role, planning operations with the tactical insight of someone who had been there, who knew what worked and what didn't. When missions went wrong, she was there to fix them. When the impossible needed to be attempted, she led from the front. The war continued its grinding course, victories and defeats, heroes and traitors, all caught up in the chaos of conflict. But Sarah had found her place in it, the balance between thinking and doing, between planning and action. 1 year after the mission that had made her a hero, Sarah received a letter. It had been forwarded through multiple channels, delayed by bureaucracy and security screening. The handwriting was careful, clearly written by someone not accustomed to the English alphabet. Inside was a photograph of the little girl, now in a new country, smiling at a birthday cake with the number 7 on it. On the back, someone had written in careful English, "She asked me to tell you thank you, warrior angel. You gave her a future." Sarah pinned the photograph next to the drawing on her wall. 2 images, one showing who she had been in that moment of crisis, the other showing the result of her choices. Together, they told a story of courage and consequence, of sacrifice and salvation. Rodriguez found her looking at the photos, a smile on her face despite the tears in her eyes. "Pretty kid," he observed. "She is," Sarah agreed. "And she's alive, growing up somewhere safe, because we were willing to jump from a helicopter into hell." "You'd do it again, wouldn't you?" Rodriguez asked, though it wasn't really a question. Sarah thought about the fear, the exhaustion, the moments when death had been a trigger pull away. She thought about the betrayal and the cost and the weight of command. And then she thought about 42 people alive, about a little girl celebrating her 7th birthday, about the difference one mission could make. "In a heartbeat," she said. Outside, the sound of helicopters filled the air as another mission launched. Sarah watched through the window as soldiers loaded up, checked their weapons, prepared to leap into danger. She recognized some of them, soldiers she had trained, officers she had mentored. They were carrying forward the same mission she had dedicated her life to, protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The helicopters lifted off, banking toward the horizon where new challenges waited. Sarah watched until they disappeared from sight, then turned back to her desk where mission plans waited for her attention. There was always another crisis, another village to save, another impossible situation that required someone willing to leap into the combat zone. And as long as there were people who needed saving, Sarah Mitchell would be there, ready to unleash hell on anyone who threatened the innocent. Not for glory or recognition or medals, but because it was the right thing to do. Because someone had to stand between the darkness and the light. Because that little girl deserved to grow up without fear. That was the choice she had made when she leapt from the helicopter all those months ago. And it was the choice she would keep making every single day for as long as she wore the uniform. Some people were born to lead from behind desks. Others were born to lead from the front. Sarah knew which one she was, and she wouldn't have it any other way. Rough file after file, studying each face carefully. Sarah watched her expression, looking for recognition. But photograph after photograph, the woman shook her head. As the sun set outside, painting the sky in shades of red and orange, Sarah felt frustration building. They had interviewed over 100 people, checked countless alibis, and still had no solid suspect. Then, the old woman stopped at a particular photograph. Her hand trembled as she pointed at it. She spoke rapidly to Malik, her voice rising with agitation. Malik's face went pale. He looked up at Sarah and Shah. "She says this is him. She's certain." Sarah looked at the photograph and felt her world tilt. She knew that face, had seen it just hours ago, in fact, the man who had pulled her into the rescue Humvee. the young specialist who had called her a hero. Corporal Barnes, you think there's a leak? She asked quietly. I think there are questions that need answers, the major said carefully. Your debriefing just became a lot more important. And probably a lot longer. Sarah suppressed a sigh. So much for rest. But if there was a security breach, if someone on their side was feeding information to the enemy, then every future operation was at risk. Every soldier was in danger. Understood, sir. When do you need me? Give yourself an hour. Get cleaned up, get some food. But then, we need to go through everything, every detail of what happened out there. The major walked away, leaving Sarah standing with her team. They had heard the exchange, understood the implications. The mission wasn't over. The evacuation continued, civilians being loaded as fast as possible. But it wasn't fast enough. The helicopters were taking fire from multiple directions, their armor pinging with impacts. One of the door gunners slumped forward, hit, but another soldier immediately took his place and kept firing. Sarah did a quick count. Maybe 20 civilians still waiting. Her team was down to their last magazines. The enemy was closing in, emboldened by the knowledge that the defenders were running out of ammunition. A massive explosion rocked one of the nearby buildings, and Sarah looked up to see a fighter jet screaming overhead. The air support had arrived. Another building exploded as bombs found their target. The enemy fire slackened as fighters scrambled for cover. Thank you, fast movers, Sarah whispered. But Sarah hadn't survived 3 combat tours by giving up when things got hard. She had survived by being smarter, tougher, and more ruthless than the enemy. And she wasn't about to let these people down. Get these civilians organized, she ordered Rodriguez. Anyone who can walk helps someone who can't. We move as one unit. She turned to Chun. I need you to take half the team and set up a defensive perimeter on the north side. Hold at all costs until extraction arrives. The young lieutenant's face was grim, but determined. Yes, ma'am. Sarah keyed her radio to the command frequency. Overwatch, this is Viper 6. We have civilians secured, but need immediate fire support to clear an LZ. Can you provide? The response crackled back. Viper 6, Overwatch. We have fast movers inbound. ETA 5 minutes. Mark your position and enemy concentrations. 5 minutes. In combat, that could be an eternity. Sarah looked at her team, at the scared civilians, at the walls that were barely standing between them and the enemy. 5 minutes to hold. 5 minutes to survive. Outside, the sound of gunfire intensified. The enemy was closing in.